You know, I often say the story of Princess Zelda as seen in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the most Zelda-focused personal legend of her we've gotten throughout the series by far. We really get a glimpse into her inner thoughts, feelings, emotions, and insecurities like never before in a Zelda game. So today, let's take a look at all that and explore how this descendant of the goddess Hylia fell in love with the spirit of the hero incarnated. It all begins when we first see the princess chronologically speaking in Breath of the Wild. She's meeting with the four champions, getting them on board to help her prepare for Calamity Ganon. We know based on her conversation with Rivali that Link has already become her appointed first knight.
I know I play the biggest part in helping that... that little knight with the darkness-sealing sword, correct?
But as we'll see, he hasn't been assigned to duty yet.
You sound like father. He's assigning a knight to watch over me wherever I go. I hear the top contender is the most accomplished swordsman in all of Hyrule.
That could only be...
It's somewhat safe to assume that Link and Zelda have not officially met yet or only been formally introduced by the king. Based on how she confirms to Mipha by name who the other champions are, except for Link.
Goron Vigilance, Daruk. Rito Confidence, Rivali. Gerudo Spirit, Urbosa. And also, the Hylian with the sword that seals the darkness.
We know she already thinks of him differently for better or worse because of his special appointed role. And for any multitude of reasons, she's hesitant to express this, especially if she knows Mipha's view of him, so she's slow to break the news of how he'll be spending so much time with her, even though she mostly resents having to have him follow her around. We see further into her true feelings in her diary, where she writes, "After meeting with the champions, I left to research the ancient technology." She continues, "Tomorrow my father is assigning him, in all capitals, as my appointed knight. ... The earliest chronological scene with Link shows him with the other four champions standing before King Rome Bosphoramus Hyrule at the ceremony, and then all of them hanging out with Zelda and Purah under a gazebo on the royal grounds while they talk about the Sheikah Slate. And Mipha suggests they take a group photo. Later that same day comes his formal knighting as the chosen hero at the Sacred Ground ruins. Despite viewing him with disdain of some kind, perhaps jealousy and anger, frustration, that he seems to be living out his chosen path and she has so many self-doubts of her own. And a short time thereafter, we see the two of them together for the first time out in the field on her way to do research on Vah Rudania, where all of a sudden she stops and calls out her doubt about his ability to protect with that sword on his back proficiently when duty really calls.
How proficient are you right now wielding that sword on your back? Legend says that an ancient voice resonates inside it. Can you hear it yet, hero?
It's a legitimate question to ask, but the way she says it when she asks if he can really hear the sword talking to him, it's more sarcastic or patronizing. It's enough to suggest she's reflecting her self-doubt onto him and then lashing out because she knows he's already proven himself to be where he's at. Later in her diary, she states, "I set out for Goron City today to make some adjustments to Divine Beast Vah Rudania. I still recall feeling his eyes on me as I walked ahead. The feeling stayed with me so long, I grew anxious and weary. It is the same feeling I've felt before in his company, and still not a word passes his lips. I never know what he's thinking. It makes my imagination run wild. Guessing at what he's thinking but will not say. What does the boy chosen by the sword that seals the darkness think of me? Will I ever truly know? Then, I suppose it's simple. A daughter of Hyrule's royal family, yet unable to use sealing magic? He must despise me." And so right away we see a very human side to her. And now, the Sheikah Slate is a smart device with fingerprint recognition or something for identity protection to somehow know if it's in use by the intended individual when trying to open shrines. And so it doesn't work when she sneaks away to open one with it, and it's here when we see her frustration with Link following her around boil over. But he's employed by her father to be her bodyguard. He's just doing his job.
I thought I made it clear that I'm not in need of an escort. It seems I'm the only one with a mind of my own. I, the person in question, am fine, regardless of the king's orders. Return to the castle and tell that to my father, please. And stop following me!
She later expresses regret with her actions, writing, "I said something awful to him today. My research was going nowhere, I was feeling depressed, and I had told him repeatedly not to accompany me. But he did anyway, as he always does, and so I yelled at him without restraint. He seemed confused by my anger. I feel terribly guilty. And that guilt only makes me more agitated than I was before." So she feels guilty for lashing out at him in anger, which makes her more angry, thus causing more difficulty in not yet lashing out at him in anger again. A vicious cycle of emotion. We see when Link arrives in the Gerudo Desert, assumably to escort Zelda home after a meeting with Urbosa, they bond over a quick discussion on the responsibility of taking care of Zelda since Urbosa was friends with her mother, so they go way back. And I feel like she's given Link the vibe test here or something, and he passed.
So, spill it, boy. Have the two of you been getting along all right? It's okay, I know. Your silence speaks volumes. She really is quite special. You be sure to protect her with your life. It's quite the honor.
So then she snaps some thunder and wakes up the princess, who's surprised to see Link standing there, confused, possibly embarrassed, and feeling some kind of vulnerable. And the next morning, on their way back, she runs out ahead into the desert by herself along the road between Gerudo Town and Karakara Bazaar, when suddenly she's confronted by 3 Yiga who begin a chase. Immediately frightened for her life, she bursts into a full sprint in an attempt to escape. However, in her panic, she trips and is surrounded by the ruthless attackers. And as the leader of the group raises his hook for the kill and swings it down towards her, she shuts her eyes and shields herself like a cornered animal of prey, and just then, Link arrives and blocks the weapon with the Master Sword, swiping it out of the Yiga's hand into the air. And he does not spare the same courtesy Urbosa did in letting them all have their lives. As this main culprit collapses, we see Link stoically posed, awaiting for the other two to make their move. They choose to retreat, and he lets them. It's here when we see in her eyes that she's looking at him differently, and more importantly, she begins taking responsibility for her own actions, stating in her diary, "I'm unsure how to put today's events into words. Words so often evade me lately, and now more than ever. He saved me. Without a thought for his own life, he protected me from the ruthless blades of the Yiga clan. Though I've been cold to him all this time, taking my selfish and childish anger out on him at every turn. Still, he was there for me. I won't ever forget that. Tomorrow, I shall apologize for all that has transpired between us, and then I will try talking to him. To Link, it's worth a shot." From here, she's more receptive to his presence. As their adventure continues, they make their way to Eldin, and he fights off a small army of monsters single-handedly, after which she expresses care for his safety during battle while tending to his wounds, much like we see Mipha do as well. Around this time is when Zelda becomes more comfortable with the idea of having Link around while she's doing research out in the field. She seems lighter and brighter, more optimistic. We get small bits of symbolism while she talks about the silent princess thriving out in the wild, perhaps not much unlike herself, who is now beginning to open up more.
The princess can only thrive out here, in the wild. All that we can hope is that the species will be strong enough to prosper on its own.
And the two continue this trajectory as we next see them caught out in the rain, waiting under a tree for a storm to let up. Link decides to use this downtime to practice honing his craft with the sword, while she opens up to him a bit more in her thoughts. When she poses a hypothetical question about him fulfilling his role in life as a knight, Link pauses from his practice because he knows she's really talking about her own life's journey and all the pressure of keeping up with what the public expects of her as the princess.
What if one day you realized that you just weren't meant to be a fighter? Yet the only thing people ever said was that you were born into a family of the royal guard, and so no matter what you thought, you had to become a knight.
This is the moment when Link starts being more to her than just a chosen knight. He's her companion. We know this is when he finally opens up to her and shares about why he doesn't speak so much. And I believe it's under this tree in West Necluda in the pouring rain when the Princess of Hyrule found herself falling hopelessly in love with her own personal hero. Evidence lies in her next diary entry where she writes, "Bit by bit I've gotten Link to open up to me. It turns out he's quite a glutton. He can't resist a delicious meal. When I finally got around to asking why he's so quiet all the time, I could tell it was difficult for him to say, but he did. With so much at stake and so many eyes upon him, he feels it necessary to stay strong and to silently bear any burden. A feeling I know all too well. For him, it has caused him to stop outwardly expressing his thoughts and feelings. I always believed him to be simply a gifted person who had never faced a day of hardship. How wrong I was. Everyone has struggles that go unseen by the world. I was so absorbed with my own problems, I failed to see his. I wish to talk to him more and to see what lies beneath those calm waters, to hear him speak freely and openly. And perhaps I too will be able to bare my soul to him and share the demons that have plagued me all these years." So obviously she thinks more of him than a simple bodyguard. And no longer just curious, she wants to know everything about him and be there for him, to understand him, and she wants him to understand her. She's speaking of her hopes and dreams. Of course, from here their story is a roller coaster. They're separated for a century, reunited for a few years. She starts expressing herself to him freely, no longer on paper.
I'm surprised to admit it, but I can accept that.
They move in together and are subsequently separated and reunited yet again under more perilous circumstances. By the end of Tears of the Kingdom, they kind of walk off into the sunset, as much of a cliche as it may be, and as much of a meme as Zelink theory is, there's a reason why people like it. In Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom especially, as I said at the beginning and outlined throughout this video, Link and Zelda just seem closer than ever before, you know, like a young couple that's been together for a little while, and somehow, if possible, they show even more care for one another while rebuilding Hyrule and building their lives together. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. Did I leave out anything interesting? Let me know in the comments. And thank you so very much to all my channel members. I really cannot say thank you enough. And because this is a love-themed episode, here's a Valentine for all of you. If you made it this far, like the video and consider subscribing to catch more Zelda content like this. And until next time, stay cool and always keep punching out there. Aloha.